Yeah, for anyone joining us, we are streaming live onto the Home Education Action Group from the Learn Free Home Educators Conference, which is finished now. This is the very last session of the Learn Free conference, and you can see from the back that's kind of what the website looks like. And we've just actually had a wonderful couple of days with amazing content, and so I've actually Amy in here with me because we're celebrating the end of the conference as well. And we're going to talk about the political situation. And what was the actual title again that you said there, Alison? I've just not got it in front of me. Yeah.
A way forward, understanding the political process and how we can take action to influence it.
Wonderful. That's a good topic. I wonder who thought of that. Okay, so we've got a bit of a panel going. So I'm going to hopefully get you all spotlit, those that are going to participate in the panel. So Randall, I don't know if you want to kick off, so I think most people in the Home Education Action Group already understand where we find ourselves politically, the challenges we currently face. You had a great conversation, which is now available live with Tristram, which was, I found, immensely helpful, and that's available on the Action Group somewhere as far as I know. And so where should we start this conversation? What do you think is a good place to start?
Where I want to start is I've been looking for ages to try and find something that will help me understand the process through Parliament. And today I found a website, so I'm just putting the link to it in the chat. It's the Institute for Government, and hopefully I can screen share it. That's what I want to share. Right, I think that's been screen shared. Yeah. Hang on. Is that is that covering it? Oh, let's stick it down there. That'll do. Right. So this is the Institute for Government, and what it is, it's one of their explainers, and it's how bills are amended by Parliament, and it goes through and it tells everybody what are amendments to bills, who can make it, why bills are amended or amendments are proposed. I'm not going through all that. This is what I want to concentrate on. There's a table. I've blown it up fairly big on my browser so you can get to see it. And this table tells you the stage of the bill. It tells you when it happens. It tells you what happens in the Commons at this stage. And an important thing to say here is that basically the stages are different in the Lords and in the Commons. And the schools bill has been started in the Lords, so it's going through that first. And I think they're trying to get it through before the summer recess. And then they'll go through the Commons in the autumn, and however long it takes them. So I'm going to concentrate tonight on taking you through what happens in the Lords. First of all, let's come over to the left-hand side, the parliamentary stage. First reading, it's already had that in the Lords. It's only a formality. They say here that the long title of the bill is read out in the chamber. Absolutely no debate takes place and no amendments can be made. It's just introducing it, showing it in through the door into the House of Lords, and that's it. And it will be the same when it happens in the Commons. The moment the bill leaves the Lords, within an hour or so, it will have been introduced in the Commons. When Lord Solly's bill went from the Lords to the Commons and it had its first reading, everybody panicked. It never got any further than the first reading. So don't panic when it goes through. The next stage is the second reading. And in the Lords, only amendments voting down the whole bill or expressing a view on it can be made at this stage. No reasons need to be given. And that didn't happen. Sadly, it didn't happen on this occasion. Instead, various peers stood up and expressed an interest in the bill. They said what they liked about it, and they said what they didn't like about it. And one of the things that they all seemed to agree on that they didn't like about it was the fact that it left too much to the Secretary of State to decide at a later date. And I think a lot of us in the home educating communities felt that was true. But it got through that stage and it got moved on to the next stage, which here you can see is called the committee stage, which is line by line scrutiny of the bill. And I must admit, this is the most complex procedure for somebody like me who's trying to keep up with it, but there's amendments coming left, right and centre and things being published. I think by now they should all be completed because I was told that the deadline was yesterday, so there should be no more amendments happen. The first committee stage event is on the 8th of June, which is Wednesday next week, a week tomorrow. Normally there's 8 of these, so don't expect home education sections to be discussed for the first 2 or 3 at least. It might not be till 3, 4 or so on, because they've got a lot of work to do on the changes in schools. But what happens, I'm just going to read it, it's the simplest thing. The committee stage takes place on the floor of the House or in Grand Committee. This will be a committee of the whole House. That is different from what happens in the Commons, but I'm not going there. Any member can turn up, any member can put down amendments. But here's the important factor. So please don't think what's happening when you see this. It says, and I'll highlight it, amendments are routinely tabled but rarely pushed to a vote at the committee stage. If you don't understand that, there'll be a lot of panic when it gets round to the home education stuff. Certainly I thought, why are they pulling them out at this stage when I watched Lord Soley's bill go through? It is normal procedure. This is not an attempt, the second reading is not an attempt to get amendments made to the bill, and we need to understand that. The second reading is an attempt to raise issues for the government to think about. What it boils down to is that basically an amendment has got a lot more chance of sticking if the government make the change. If the government doesn't make the change, they can always reverse it in the Commons. So
Randall,
really,
could I just
yeah.
ask, somebody's just quite rightly said that you might have to explain who or what Lord Soley is, because a lot of the people that are listening today weren't around at that point.
Okay, I will do that now. If you're not familiar with the name Lord Soley, Lord Soley is a Labour peer. He is better known as Clive Soley, who was a trade unionist many moons ago. He was around in 2009 and 2010 when the Badman Review and the following Children's School and Families Bill was being taken through Parliament. He was active on a website called the Lords of the Blog, which is the House of Lords blog site, and he got a lot of earache from home educators because he was very supportive of Badman's proposals. We all know that died a death when Gordon Brown called it a general election, which he lost. But it didn't die, it just got kicked into the long grass. And in 2017, and I'm not going to go into the process, but Lord Soley got a space to introduce a private members bill in the House of Lords to establish a register of home educated children and some level of monitoring, though he was advised not to push that too loudly. That started in 2017 in the Lords. In 2000, it went through the stages there, and by then, in 2010, you couldn't watch Parliament on the internet. You had to watch it later on your telly or other times. They didn't stream it live like they do now, but in 2017, 18, we could watch it. So that was one of the things I was doing. And he got that bill through the Lords, but we were picking up information then that the government were not interested in getting any further than that. It got its first reading in the House of Commons. It never got a second one. But what it did do, it stirred the muck up from 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier. And it is what was the catalyst for today's situation. Lord Solly's bill restarted the conversation, woke the media up so they could put misleading information in the press and on the news generally, and it stirred everything up. And now we find ourselves faced with this bill, which potentially would do a lot more damage than Badman's proposals or Lord Solly's proposals in the short term. They would have all done the same amount of damage in the long term, but that's it. So that is who Lord Solly is. He's still in the House of Lords, and he got a lot of praise from people during the second reading. So to go back, a week tomorrow, they'll begin the second reading stage. Amendments will be made. The committee stage. Amendments will be made. They will be withdrawn. Most of them will be withdrawn and not voted on. The peers have now finished the process of putting the amendments forward. It will go through that, and then we'll come down to the report stage. And the report stage is often much shorter. I've read somewhere on Parliament's website that it's usually a day. But crucially, this is when any meaningful amendments will be made in the Lords. Any amendments can be made as long as they've not already been defeated during the committee stage. So if you've got an amendment going forward in committee, and you've not quite got the support for it in committee stage, and you want to give yourself much more time to get other people on board, you might very wisely take it out to the voting at committee stage so you can put it again. And the peers can put forward amendments as soon as the previous stage has finished, but no less than 2 days before they are due to be considered. So that is the crucial stage in the Lords.
Can I just interject at this point?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that all the amendments are in right now. That means 2 days before the next meeting is. So the amendments can continue to come in until the last bit.
No, they can't start coming in yet. There's usually 8 days of a second reading of committee stage debates. At the moment, they are planned. The first one is on Wednesday next week, as I say, and then there's 4 more on in the diary, which is the Monday and Wednesday of every week. Now, the government published the timetable for Parliament 2 or 3 weeks in advance. I'm just not sure if it's slightly different with the bank holidays. So I expect next week to see 2 more added to that list. We'll know if they're going past 8. The amendments that have gone forward now are to be considered during the committee stage, but the slate is wiped clean at the end of that, and peers can begin to put in new amendments from the close of the thing. They won't put them all in. some have been discussion starters to get the government to go away and think. And that is our biggest hope. But then for the third reading debate, they can put in, they will not put in there will be nowhere near the number. The peers will be putting in those they think will succeed or will cause the government enough problem to go further and think about it, ready for when it gets into the Commons. So those are the amendments. This is the crucial time in one way, but it's not in another, because as I've said, if the government doesn't like the amendments, they can get them taken out in the House of Commons and put back to the original. Often, if they like a bit of it and they don't like it all, they will keep the bit they like and revert on the other bits. Amendments to are limited to clarifying uncertainties, improving drafting, etc. All in that area. The best thing is look it up. We're not down here, but I'll just quickly, it goes over to the Commons, and then they've got all the same stages, but they do different things. You can see the amount of text in here is very different, but you come down to the bottom, when it gets through there, if the bill has, as the bill started in the Lords, it has then got to go back to the House of the Lords for them to have a final look at the drafting. If they don't like some of the changes, they can change it again and kick it back. And this very parliamentary term of ping pong starts. It might go between the two houses 2 or 3 times. Normally that is over a period of days. Occasionally, when there's a lot of pressure to get a bill through, it will go through between the two houses several times each day. And in the end, the government can say, the Lords haven't listened to us, we're going to stop listening to them. They don't get a right to vote on it this time. We're having our way. So that is the general thing. I hope that's helpful. As I say, that's the most comprehensive layman's guide I've found to what's happening in Parliament. I haven't been able to go through it all. I am going to stop sharing, and if people want to come back and ask questions or discuss it, this might be a good time to get this section out of the way.
Just a quick comment on amendments. When I said amendments can content, so for example, Joe and I and Wendy had Lord Lucas's amendments that he was going to put in, and we edited and commented on them and added some to that. And he will have held some of them back for the next stage, but we can still continue to suggest them to him, because I haven't even looked at section 4 yet. We can still continue to suggest them to him so that he puts them in at the appropriate time. So, you know, everybody's able to do that. And then it all starts again in the Commons anyway, and we've got more amendments we can put in. So
yeah, but I think the other thing as well, which is what we've got to remember here, it's not just the formal process that matters. If people can get their MPs or peers into a working relationship with them, and I want to say you don't get that by dumping a load of lengthy documents.
no,
you need
absolutely
to engage with them, right? You need to engage with them. That basically them having conversations with ministers and others outside of the process probably can do as much good as formal amendments.
Right, so there's a question in here that says, what if we've only got a minimal amount of time, what should we be doing? And I think that's relevant here, because I think if you've got a minimal amount of time, then creating a relationship with your MP so that you, over the period of the next couple of months or so that when it comes to the Commons, you've already got that relationship with your MP and you can act on it. That would be one of the things that I would definitely be spending my time on right now.
I think Joe wants to answer that one.
Go on, Joe.
I was probably going to say along the same lines, but I think for those who don't know what building a relationship with your MP looks like, the first thing you can do is actually write or call their office, which should be available online, and you can request an appointment in their surgery, which means you get a face-to-face meeting. And if you'd rather not go on your own, or if you're under the radar and not known to local authority and you're not confident, you can go as a group. So, you know, ask one of your local homemade groups that you go to, and go as a small group of you, and you can actually have a conversation. And I would say that, you know, you expect not all of your views to align, but go seeking common ground. And you can Google their interests beforehand to gauge that. But it's gauging common ground, trying to have conversations about where you share an interest. That might be under special educational needs, it might be under data, it might be under freedoms or civil liberties. And so it's finding those things to talk about, and going not in a kind of too emotional, because that's not always easy for other people to take on board what your points are, but go with the view to sharing your experience to help them understand, because most of the MPs you will speak to will not have home educated. Some might not even realise it was a legal option, and most of them will not know what it looks like. They won't understand the complexity that exists within home education. So it's going with a view of it being a knowledge exchange rather than anything else. And I think that's really important. And that's what it means to building a relationship. And if we know we've got the next couple of weeks or couple of months before we want them to take an action for us, that's really good groundwork to get them to understand your point of view, understand what you're asking them to fight for you on. And then when they get information about some of the research or data that perhaps we want to amend or suggest is taken out of the bill, they'll have a better understanding of that. So when they speak up for you in the House of Commons, that they've actually got a basis to do that from.
Yeah, and Joe, what you've said before as well in other conversations is that you need to bring your stories. So you need to show how this is actually affecting real people. And I think one of the things I noticed when I listened in at the House of Lords is a lot of Lords would mention something. There might be something they allude to that gives you an idea. Wait a minute, I've got a little point there that I can actually attach my argument onto. And where you can bring them, maybe just, you know, if you think of a dial, you can maybe just shift their position just a little closer to our side of the dial. So for instance, one of the Lords mentioned about having dyslexia. And you could use that and say to them, well, you know, do you know that, you know, in schools, this is currently what's happening. And so parents with children with dyslexia are finding it better to home educate. And you could give that, you know, you can make it something that's really relevant and brings it home to them because they've got experience. And even the thing of how, you know, that how that person felt as a child being in that situation, and then how they might have been relieved to have been out of school and how it would have felt. And, you know, you can bring an angle, but the real life story of how this could harm people, the negative effects on people. But it needs to be real examples, and we actually have plenty of those in our local communities. So I think that it's the same for MPs as with the Lords. And even just going back to the Lords, if you want to write to any of them, and I mean, I don't know how much it helps at this point to contact them, Randall, you can come back on that one. But, you know, it's finding where that little point is that you can hook and maybe bring the dial a little bit closer to our side.
Yeah.
Becky's got her hand up. I'm hoping she's wanted to come in and tell us her experience of actually connecting with an MP. So, Becky, put your hand down, and if that's what you want to tell us, you've got a couple.
Oh, look at Alison smirking that I put my hand up, aren't you? You're like, now she puts her flipping hand up. Oh, you're on mute. You're muted. You're muted and my hand's up. What's happened to the world? Yeah, so I just wanted to come in and say a couple of bits about that. So everything that everybody said so far is spot on. So for when I went to go meet my MP, who who's been really helpful. Most of you know that he's the reason why I've got an exhibition at the Houses of Parliament. So I went to go and meet him, and this is all on, I don't know where it is. Where is it? It's on something that we did. We shared it somewhere, definitely. But basically, I went along. And one thing that I will say that maybe wouldn't work for everybody, but that I would say that I slightly disagree with Alison and Randall on, and that is the stuff that you take with you. So when I went to go and meet my MP, it was about the Education Select Committee inquiry, and I went armed with like a stack of papers like this. However, something to bear in mind here is I didn't just go armed with a stack of papers of waffle. I went armed with a stack of papers of like graphs and research studies and loads of stuff that basically just showed the Education Select Committee up for complete morons, basically, that weren't doing their job properly. And I had like a covering letter with it that had basically 3 or 4, 5 points that were my main points that I was making in the meeting. And then I gave them the rest of the stuff and I said, you know, obviously, I'm not expecting you to read this here, but I want to give it to you so that you can take it away. And to be fair, I didn't expect him to read it, but I thought maybe like his assistant or somebody would read it just so that he could give him like a kind of breakdown of what was actually in there without him having to read through, you know, like 100 pages or something. But I think in my situation, that worked in my favor because he could see that I was very, very serious. I had taken a lot of time to actually find this information out. He didn't know that there was loads of people helping me do it, obviously. And this stuff is available at the moment on, you know, it's on all of the, like on the action group. But what the other thing that I wanted to say was, we're talking about meeting these MPs. I know we're saying like, oh, build a relationship and we can go to their surgery and stuff, but there isn't a limit on how much you can do this stuff. Just because you go to meet your MP at the surgery once, that doesn't mean, oh, I've seen them now and that's it, I can't go again. If like some more amendments come up over the next like couple of weeks, you can go and see them again to discuss those ones. And in fact, that might actually be better. I don't know, I've not tried doing it, but it means that it's kind of shorter, more concise, and it keeps it relevant and keeps it in their heads. And also as well, to be fair, they might not be interested the first time, but then somebody might say something that actually, you know, like in the Lords or in the House of Commons or whatever, that then they start to get interested in it. So I think obviously don't go every week wanting to stay there for like an hour or something, bombarding them, but you know, as tempting as it is. But I wouldn't necessarily think that I've written one letter and it's not gone very well, so I'm not going to do anything else, or I've gone once to the surgery and didn't really get to say anything. I would kind of politely and calmly kind of repeat that a few times, kind of to not go away, basically, is what I'm saying.
I'll come in. I know Joe's wanted to answer a question from Jonathan, which is worthwhile, I think. But just a couple of reflections there, Becky. You went to meet your MP, right? Your first letter didn't have 18 pages of text in it.
I didn't send a letter. No, I think that's the difference.
Yeah. And if I remember rightly, he'd already spoken positively about home education in some of the context. He was,
so he had never spoken in the Houses of Parliament about it, but he was aware of it because we have we're in Cornwall and we have quite kind of an active community that goes to MPs anyway, and that because of where we live, he knew people that home educated. So right. It does make a difference, but I would still say that the thing is the same, like for anybody, is that unless they reply to you saying, bugger off, I'm not interested, go away kind of thing. Well, sorry, Julia. Is that actually just because they've kind of not been really positive straight away, that doesn't mean that you can't go back and go, thank you very much for your input and what you've said so far. Can I just kind of, clarify a couple of points, or can we discuss this? Or this was brought up in the Lords this week. So yeah, I definitely would not have sent that massive wad of information in a letter or an email, because it would have just been deleted and put in the bin, basically. Yeah. It was funny, is what you can say. He found it funny that I had gone armed with all that paper.
Joe?
Hello. Yes, the question from Jonathan, I'll just read it for those who haven't seen it, is, are you suggesting that we suggest small changes that might appeal to our MP rather than trying to get rid of the whole notion of regulating home education? No, That's definitely not the suggestion. I think that there has to be, I think it's effective to have different approaches. So, you know, one approach is taking the wheels off, you know, bit by bit. So deconstructing what they're suggesting in the bill. And when in the House of Commons or in the House of Lords, when they raise these amendments or raise the issues or ask for the bill to be stopped, they have to go in with points. They only get a few minutes. So when we want them to address something, it's really useful for them to have one or two main points that they can say something quick about, because they've got a few minutes to do it. So that's really important. So the other part of that, so one thing, yes, suggest some changes or suggest some omissions, suggest stuff's taken out. But it also, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying the whole bill is wrong, that the whole premise of the bill is wrong, and we disagree wholeheartedly with being forced to register and being treated this way. That's absolutely right to do as well. And I would say as well, for people who don't realise, because I know the bill seems like a great big document, the main part that's useful is part 3. So if you bring up the schools bill, there's a PDF of it. And part 3 is probably the most relevant to us, and that's pages 42 to 58. So it's not too much just to skim through, and that will give you a good idea to start with. And I think one of the questions further down is actually about doing a practical workshop about how to talk to the bill, and I think probably that's something that probably we're all up for doing, that might be really useful.
Randall, so there was a question which was in terms of the processes. Sandrine was asking, can the Commons then do pretty much what they want?
The government, as long as it maintains a majority, can basically do what it wants, but it can be hard work for it to do it. The Commons, because it's the elected chamber, always has a higher status than the Lords. And yes, when it gets to ping pong, it will go between the houses 2 or 3 times, but then they will say, hang on, we're not going to keep going around this circle, we're just cutting the process. So the government can do it. But the whole point is, as Joe was almost saying, this picture of taking the wheels off, you basically, if they pick up a message that different MPs are saying, well, this bit won't work, that bit won't work. Imagine like you've got an old-fashioned steam engine and thinking to yourself, trying to stand on the track in front of it, stopping it with your bare hands, you might not manage it. But if while it's in the station, you can sneak around and take off 2 or 3 of the wheels, and while somebody else is doing that on the other side, when they try and move it, it just won't go anywhere. So it could be that either they realize that, well, we can't get this one through because, and I would say the big lever we've got is data protection. I think that is our biggest hope of everything, that if they cannot collect the data on the children that they're asking for, it will pull all the teeth out of this bill, and it will really make it a futile exercise. So if they can't go around asking for what is your protected data because of its special interest, then what good are they going to do with the register? You know, so things like that might get them to think again. But basically, the power lies with the government, which I learned only about 3 months ago. The government is not the Conservative Party. It's 123 people at the moment who hold a ministerial job. The government is not the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party, the government is taken from the Conservative Party. So other Conservative MPs, and I believe Becky's in Cornwall is a Conservative, can be on our side quite loudly and can speak for us quite clearly. So, you know, it isn't the Conservative Party, it is the government that need to be hearing and changing. Yeah, I'm not watching the chat that much, so I'll shut it.
I also just want to make anyone aware who's joined more recently that we are actually streaming live to the Home Education Action Group on Facebook. And so that's where some of these other questions are coming from, in case you're wondering. So Amelia asked, do we expect that this would all be wrapped up by the end of the year, would you say?
Very briefly, first thing, just to put a timetable in, I think I'm fairly right. The summer recess starts in the middle of July, something around about the 17th. So you have 6 weeks, 6-7 weeks to get to know MP. It's not 2 months there. If they've got it through the Lords by then, it will start in September. Then we have the party conference season, so they all stop coming in, turning up to work again. I would think it is more likely to finish its course through the Parliament and get royal assent in the spring, whatever form it's in, than in the autumn. So I would probably see it getting through in the spring rather than the autumn, or after New Year, early New Year. That would be my feeling.
And it also depends on how much of a fuss is made and how much the government push it as well, because they really want this register. So it's how long is a piece of string? You can't really predict these things. Plus, something else might happen. We might, God forbid, end up in a war with Ukraine. Then everything will be on hold with Russia, rather, over Ukraine.
Yeah. Or Boris could find himself in the deep muck. And
well, the 1922 committee are after him right now, so that might be the case.
Yeah, those who have a praying mindset, this would be a good time.
What that will do to everybody else, to the rest of the timetable, I've no idea, but it will rock it.
Yeah. So I want to raise just a few of the things that have been in the chat. So the kinds of things you can do with your MP. So somebody has suggested that you write something personal, handwritten, rather than a template or copy and paste. I have emailed, by handwritten, it doesn't necessarily have to be handwritten. Although if you want to get your child to write a letter as well, that could be quite a good thing to do. But I emailed my MP and she has asked for more information. I have emailed her a couple of times, so she couldn't really keep ignoring me. So it's a personal letter from, you want to kind of bring in those personal stories if you can. And as others have said, just choose a couple of key points just so that you don't overwhelm them, Jo.
Yeah, I think this probably relates to some of the questions in the chat, but I think if you've not read the school bill, or if you look at it and it's very technically worded, if it feels a bit overwhelming, which it can do for all of us, you can also pop perhaps on one of the groups, this is my situation, how will the bill affect me, and you can kind of gauge some answers that way if you're not confident about reading the bill.
Yeah. So somebody also commented about their MP being a deputy speaker who has no vote, and Katie responded that she can still raise concerns with the Secretary of State and pass on the constituents' views. So she does have a voice, as is Becky. Yeah, I think the best is if you can get an appointment to speak to your MP and let them see you face to face. Another strategy would be, if you can get them in your town at the same time, is to maybe organize a picnic. You can actually even ask them what date would suit you, and you could organize a picnic, and then as many home educators who are willing to come from the constituency to come. Well, you could actually, if you've got several constituencies in your town, you could actually invite everybody and invite all the MPs or the councillors as well. We found out recently that our Coventry Council, actually Julie Spriddle, would you mind commenting on that for me? You've got the full facts. You willing to speak up, Julie?
Yeah, sorry, I was suddenly hearing my name mentioned whilst I was busy sipping tea. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, I've been in contact with my MP. Let me just turn my camera on.
Yes, I'm trying to find you.
Here we go. I'm here. Wave. You see me in the.
Where you gone? There you are. Gal Spotlight.
It's okay. So I just close over the door because otherwise I'm hearing a lot of noise coming in from the kitchen. So I wrote to my MP and she wrote back and she said basically, come back and talk to me when it's in the Commons. That was pretty much a summary of what she said. And then she continued to say that yes, our local authority will have an important role in enforcing what is going to be required from the bill. And then she sent me some minutes for a scrutiny committee, basically a scrutiny board, basically, which said that they were accepting everything that the Education Select Committee had actually put out, everything, and that yes, they supported fully a mandatory register for home educators, and it was just accepted completely and utterly without any question, as far as I could tell.
They
And
didn't consult us either, did they, at all?
no, they didn't. And having talked to you afterwards, briefly, of course, because you've been busy with conference, I've been trying not to distract you too much. I found out that you'd asked specifically to be invited to this scrutiny board meeting, and they hadn't. And so they had effectively excluded home educators from taking part in a meeting which was specifically to discuss home education.
Yeah, and that's why
Um,
you need to try and get your councillors, you know, if you're having events and so on, invite your councillors as well, because
so
you need to win them over too.
So what I've done this week, and I'll be following up with Juliet about this later this week, I said she's been very busy with the conference, is I've double checked who the chair of the Education and Children's Services Scrutiny Board is, and also who the shadow chair is, and also so that was the two of them. And who was the other person? I can't remember now. You put me on the spot, Juliet.
I
'Cause know
remember
sent
the
it to you.
name, but yeah.
In
So-
Shropshire, Julie, we met with the portfolio holder for children.
Yeah, it was the education. So it's basically it's the chair of the scrutiny board, and then it was the council member for education services and the shadow council member for education services or something. And they're the people in our case who we need to get on board. And I've also found a home educator who is about to leave the council's employ, who was present at that meeting as an employee. And so she might be able to offer some insight as well. But I've spent the week digging as well as working and home educating and listening to the conference and backwards and forwarding and lots of things. So I've sent an email, yet another email to my MP, who's probably sick and tired of hearing from me now, and she's not responding at all, saying, would you like to go to this picnic? I didn't say anything else, it's just, would you like to go to this picnic? And asking her to invite these councillors. Whether she will or won't is another matter. But as I said, all I can keep doing is trying. So
Yeah, and thank you, Julie, because Julie does work very hard. She's actually been instrumental in affecting the Green Party's policy on home education. So, you know, you can talk to somebody like Julie for some tips.
Yep, as a slight aside, just for information, I attended the Education Policy Working Group meeting for the Green Party on Monday Thursday last week. The days are all blurring. I'm sorry, but it was last week. And I'm trying to, because we've actually stopped campaigning on behalf of home education inside the Green Party because everybody's moved on and are doing other things. But Vix Lalthian, who is the education spokesperson, was present. So I deliberately went along and just to remind her that we exist. And so again, if you've got any existing links with political parties, you need to be trying to leverage them. So yeah, so I monopolized the whole 15 minutes of the Education Policy Working Group meeting on our behalf, which may or may not have gone down well, but I tried.
Yeah,
That's
well
all.
done, Julie. And we were obviously very delighted with Baroness Jones's just speaking up on our behalf. So thank you so much for that, Julie. Okay, there are some questions in the chat. There was one from John somewhere. John, does panel think that the guidelines will get changed that came in only in 2019? And are people generally aware that the Department for Education say that even with the bill coming in, that the current guidelines still apply? No monitoring, no home visits don't necessarily need to show the actual work of the child. Okay, Alison wants to answer that one.
The guidelines will definitely change because they will change to statutory guidance. Statutory guidance is basically a set of guidelines that local authorities will have to follow. They won't have any choice but to follow them. The guidelines will have to change because the law will have changed. So they are going to change, but until the Act is passed, in fact, even before that, even after that, until the various parts of the Act are enacted, and that is they become live, not just that they're sat there waiting to become live. Until that point, we're still in the same place, absolutely still in the same place. Nothing has changed, despite the fact that your local authority might be acting like a very nasty bunch of people.
Could I also come in there, because looking at John's question, I think he hasn't understood the big change in the 2019 guidance, because in brackets at the end he said no monitoring, no home visits, don't necessarily need to show the actual work of the child. That isn't quite as watertight as that. The Portsmouth judgment basically says the council is in its rights to see evidence however they think they need it. So what it does say in the bill is there is no need to change legislation on monitoring because the councils already have that power as set out in the 2019 guidelines. So they assume that what they said in 2019 allows monitoring, not that it stops it, it allows it. So they're not planning to put anything here because they think they've already got it.
Yeah, and it's clear as mud, really, because the actual guidelines, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, the 2019 guidelines actually do not fit the law. I think they're wrong.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Let's answer this last question. The Portsmouth decision, it's not a bill, it's a decision, does not say councils must see work. It actually says if they want to, they're in their rights to say they need to see it. It isn't mandatory for them to look at it, but it doesn't prevent them demanding it and being accepted it's a legal move to ask for it. So councils don't have to behave but like Portsmouth, but if they get it in the head, they can behave like Portsmouth.
Okay, I just want to highlight something. So there was a question to Julie, who spoke earlier, about is there any chance that the Green Party MP might speak on this in the House of Commons? And I think the Green Party MP is Caroline Lucas. And we actually really need home educators within Caroline Lucas's constituency to be in touch with her. So is you saying Brighton, Alison?
Yes, it is Brighton.
We need to identify home educators that are in Caroline Lucas's constituency, so that, because if we want her to speak on our behalf, as Baroness Jones did in the House of Lords, it has to come from her constituents. So it's very important that people get involved. So that, this is not a time to hang back. If you are in Caroline Lucas's constituency, perhaps have a talk with Julie as well in advance and just find out, what would be good things to do, how they could approach it, how she could approach it. Brighton Pavilions, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, Brighton Pavilions. I'm tripping on my words. I actually am making no sense tonight. I think I'm just really tired from the conference. But you know, we want to think
Just-
of
Just one thing before we forget the Caroline Lucas thing. She will have contact with the 2 Green peers, with Jenny Jones and Natalie Bennett. So basically, if anybody is approaching her and they can talk about the support we've been getting from Jenny Jones in particular, and use the amendments Jenny's put forward, that will help Caroline connect.
Yes, that's really good advice. And so the topic tonight has been a way forward. So you all need homework to do, and that's actually what we've been discussing tonight. So let's just do a little recap before we finish off. So Randall, do you think you want to run through particularly? So just a few key points.
No, I've talked a lot. Let others go, and I'll mop up everything.
Joe, do you want to say what do you think the homework? We have spoken about everything, but just to sum up.
Okay. Find out who your MP is. Find out who your councillors are. Write their emails down. Have a look at the bill or have a talk on the group. Write down for yourself what your story is. What led you to home education, why you do it, and why it works for you or your child. And then talk to other people, see how your story comes across, and then go and ask for an appointment with your MP in their surgery, or an appointment with the counsellor, or pop on an email if you don't want to do a face-to-face, or invite them to your group if your group's happy with that, and start making contact. And also, if you see other things about the bill that other people post that you think is useful, especially on Twitter, you can retweet those and tag your MP.
Yes, actually Twitter is quite a powerful tool in a lot of ways if you want to get a message across, particularly with the Lords at the moment, because you can tweet any of them. I see Ian Cunningham has just joined us. I'm not sure if he has anything he wants to add to that. Ian Cunningham is from the Self-Managed Learning Centre, and they will also be very much affected by the schools bill if it goes forward as it is. So we also have a Twitter handle, which is Fair Hearing for Home Ed. That's Fair, F-A-I-R, Hearing, H-E-A-R-I-N-G, the number 4, Home Ed. Okay, so but on the action group, on the home education action group, that should be available. You should be able to ask that if you've forgotten it. We need to get active. We need to get louder. You can see that with our conference this weekend, the theme has been bolder, freer, louder. And we do need to get much bolder and freer and louder and not be afraid. This is not a time to be afraid. We need to be stepping out of our comfort zones, because we are doing this for our children. We're doing this for future generations, for our own children to be able to home educate their children. We don't want to kick this back into the long grass. We want to kick this to the other side of the football field. So we do need to draw the line in the sand and say this is how far. We're not prepared to be pushed any further. There's another hashtag, which is Stop the Schools Bill. I've also used Say No to Schools Bill or No to Schools Bill. It actually doesn't matter. Just use them all if you need to. Joe wants to add something.
Yeah, actually, something I've found that other people have found success with is finding other charities and organisations. They are really powerful charities at lobbying. So it might be to do with, someone sent me one recently about a charity that supports women who have faced prison. I know it seems extreme, but when we look at parents and the aspect of the bill that suggests that there could be this increase in prison sentence or fines for families, and thinking about parents in that sense, others have suggested charities around safeguarding or children's rights. So if that's really a useful step as well, to find organisations or charities that might be able to support an aspect of the bill. And also just to understand that this bill isn't just about home education. More broadly, it's about everything to do with education. And there are much bigger issues in the bill than about our rights to home educate. But what is in the section about home education actually impacts everybody. There are huge issues around sharing our data, gathering too much data with limitless powers of the local authority to request data and share our data. And I think it does threaten that line in the sand over parents' responsibilities for their children's education and the states. And I think that's, if we step back from the bill and step back from the section around home education, this is very much about parental rights. And I think it's something we all need to be, much more vocal about.
in the chat, I'm just putting the Find Your MP link. So if you need to go and find your MP, you can, but it's actually pretty easy. Just Google Find Your MP and you'll get the website. So if you don't know who your MP is, I'm just trying to think if there's any other things we could do to raise awareness. What I've said to other people earlier today at the conference is, what is your sphere of influence and what is your platform? And you need to use those to influence, because we do have a lot more home educators now than we did in 2009. And we can actually be a serious force to be reckoned with. Randall.
Yeah, two things. I've just put 2 links to help with homework in the chat.
Okay.
The
So
first
those,
one,
Megan, if you could copy and paste those into the action group, that would be good.
the first one is an article by a lawyer, not written from a home educator's perspective, but just going through the different parts of the bill. This is on part 3, which is the school attendance under which the register comes. And it is a factual summary. So if people are finding it hard to condense it, that is a quick, simple read for people to get their heads round, to see what somebody with no skin in the game thinks it's implying. So it's a very good one. And if you want to, you can build your own summary on that when you write into your MP. The other one is an article by Jeremy Yallop, who some of you may already know. It's written on the Conservative Home website, but he's a home educator. He's been very involved in the fight to get fair deal for home educators in exams through the pandemic and things.
Oh, yeah.
It's here because the Conservative Home is a website that a lot of Conservative politicians read, but it sets out a lot of the basic concerns. So if you've got a Conservative MP and they are going to be the most supportive and the most effective at getting in the government's ear, this would be a good briefing for them. Point them to it, print it off, give it to them. It is a useful thing there. So that's just to help with the homework.
Yeah, and I think they also, if you know of journalists who might be willing to do a story, that's also something you could feed back to the admins on the action group, so we can try and put some stories together for them. We have had some stories come through that we thought really actually this needs to get to the press, and to just show what we need to show the reality. I want to just highlight here that the Lord for one of the Lords was reporting in the House of Lords. He said, oh, he'd had like a communication from Taunton Home Educators. So obviously Taunton Home Educators had written to him. Is that you, Joe? Is that your corner?
Joe's got a finger in that pie.
Yeah.
It's not me, it's my lovely friend Caroline.
But did you hear his response?
Sorry?
Did you hear what he said about it?
Yes, I did.
He said, "This, I don't think this bill is meant for Taunton home educators. It's not meant for the upstanding home educators." So I would like to tell some of those families that are under school attendance orders right now, what does that say? You know, if I think that there's a belief that local authorities are benign and actually are really, you know, finding there's a belief that they would never impinge on anybody's human rights and they would never cross the line. But we know the reality is that there are families, decent home educating families, ordinary home educating families, conscientious home educating families that are still being targeted. And we need to highlight those stories too, because that is definitely a big problem. And the Lords and the MPs, they're blissfully unaware that this is actually what's happening. The whole situation is, our situation is misrepresented. So yeah, that was quite telling, because I had Marita sitting right next to me in the House of Lords, and I said, well, what does that make you? So, you know, we need to be telling our stories and bringing those to our attention, because it's going to harm families and it's going to harm children. So I just want to check and see if there's anything else. in the chat there.
There's one, Juliet, that might be worth just outlining on here.
Yes,
Because could
Marita was going to come in, but I don't know if she did. Yeah.
It says, could you please spell out what the bill and register will mean for ordinary home educators? Just really simply, how will it affect us and our children's education and lives? Because it can be hard to boil down to get the message across simply.
Very good question.
Yes, it is. And I think that's probably slightly different for all of us because we all home ed differently. And I think we need to remember there are communities of home educators. There isn't a type. There are various groups within that. So you know, we have to remember the complexity within home education under that banner of education otherwise than at school, as the law states. You know, it is very broad and complex, but in a nutshell, you guys can kind of correct me or jump in, but I think in a nutshell, what this bill proposes is a shift from what is essentially a voluntary register. I say voluntary loosely because obviously if you do register from school, you automatically go on it. But to a mandatory one, and that mandatory one actually carries higher criminal penalties and sanctions than just a voluntary one does. And some of the changes around data collection, around requesting evidence, actually come with a burden of proof on the parent and a requirement for the parent to ensure accuracy or communication rather than, as it currently is, on the local authority.
Yeah, it shifts the balance of power.
It's a massive shift. And also, I think the other issue in a nutshell is that my research showed that the type of person employed as a local authority officer could range from qualified teacher status to someone with an A to C in maths and English and not even experience with children, and some even ask for a bailiff. So those are the job categories, and some of them were social service experience. So when you consider that the type of person at the local authority isn't necessarily a specialist in education, a specialist in special educational needs, you know, think about a school. If a school child has a SEND or needs an assessment or an EHCP, it'll be a SENCO that does that. So we actually don't have that in home education. So the local authority officer coming to your home or meeting you or judging the suitability of education is not necessarily qualified to do the job. This bill poses no financial underpinning for any support. It poses no new support processes. It poses no funding or things that home educators have actually asked for in consultation, exams paid for, assessments, EHCP support, other things that might actually improve families, especially when they first start their journey. This bill proposes nothing in terms of support for families. It grossly underestimates the funding required to do this. And it doesn't seem to have taken into account the complexity of running and maintaining a compulsory register and a database for that, and also doesn't seem to take into account the front line or like on the ground implications for families and children of having all this data, unlimited amount of data collection with no real boundary to that or expectation of relevance to your education. So you could have a local authority officer who is unqualified to judge suitability of education, come to your home and demand anything they see fit to ask of you and your family, not just of data, but of evidence of suitable education. Remember, they might not be able to judge that. And then if you don't comply, you face the school attendance order process. And that comes with much higher criminal sanctions than it should, arguably, I would say. And not just that, if your child is given a school attendance order and they are pushed back into school, which might not be the right place for them, and for many of you, it's why you came out of school in the first place, that the bill actually currently proposes that you could then never take your child out of school. So I would say that the impact of this bill on ordinary families is phenomenal. And if we consider we've already got qualified teachers who've been rated outstanding in different areas of the UK who've already been told, and we've got some higher academics who are at higher profile universities who have been told their education is not suitable by not necessarily a qualified person, that, you know, and being issued school attendance orders, it does not give us much hope going forward that this bill is going to do what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's going to find hidden children is nonsense. And actually, I think this bill, as Jeremy points out in his article, will just aggravate all of those who are already registered and make it harder to contact those who are not registered for fear of judgment.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. And one of the very, very important things about this bill is a good bill would normally offer protection to every sort of party. There are protective things built in so that you have something to protect you from rogue officials or whatever. This bill has no protection whatsoever built in for home educators. There's no recourse if the local authority behaves badly. There's nothing that restricts or that they are accountable.
Yeah, so you're referring to the fact that there's no appeals process. So the
There's no
person
appeals
might have
process,
wronged you or done the wrong thing or got
Yeah.
something wrong in what
Yeah.
they've interpreted in the guidelines. There's actually no way of going to an independent body for that appeal. You have to go to the person that you have the issue with. And you know, considering you might have to go back to them for anything else you need for home education, that poses huge, I think, ethical dilemmas about how that would work.
Yeah. So somebody actually, I just want to go and try and answer a few of these last questions, and then we actually need to go. So somebody said, if their MP is anti-home ed, is it still worth contacting them? And my answer would be definitely, because it's still their job to represent you as a constituent and to hear you out. So they should at least give you the benefit.
Julie's got a hand up waving about that, I think.
Okay. Where's Julie?
No, I'm here. I just wanted to answer one of the other questions that was in the chat that I think just flew past, which was what can councillors actually do about anything? Councillors actually set local policy. So councillors actually run the council. The officers are supposed to be doing as the councillors have actually directed them to do. So the councillors are the people who actually determine the general attitude of the council towards home education, and they can override anything that the officers may be doing. So if the officers that you have got are doing a really good job, but the councils actually think, no, actually they should be coming down on you really, really hard, they can basically direct and start applying pressure on those officers to change tack and to actually behave the way they want them to, because they're the council, they're the people who actually decide what you do. What councillors also do is they lobby political parties. So if you've got one dominant group that is actually running the council, then they will be feeding back into their political party what they think about home education, because the councils and councillors are members and they are influential members of a political party. So their views will actually be being echoed back into the political party of which they are a part of. So what you need to do is you need to actually get councillors on board, because that in turn will change the attitudes of political parties. Even if we deal with this schools bill, the problem isn't going to go away. What will happen is it will be kicked back into the long grass again, and it will come back again. It will come straight back at us, because what we have not done is dealt with the underlying problem, which is this suspicion and this fear of what we might be up to. Most of it, in fact all of it, as far as I'm concerned, is completely unfounded. But what's happening is, when it comes to councillors, is they're hearing from the likes of the Local Government Association, who will plonk something in front of them which says that we're awful people, won't somebody think of the children, and demanding they have all these extra powers. And because these councillors have never met a home educator, they've never met a home educated child, they know nothing, they take what the Local Government Association or any of the other bodies that are campaigning against us, and they take it as that is the truth. And that is why they will then go into a scrutiny board and they will accept everything that's said as written without questioning it.
Yeah, Sandrine's just said, how do we change that? Well, you change it by meeting with them. You change it by them seeing that you don't have two heads and six fingers on each hand. You know, you show them that you are sensible and that you are passionate about educating your child. You might even show them that you've had to home educate because their local schools are rubbish and have caused damage to your children. You make it personal. You make it personal in as much as it's personal to you. You tell your story and you say why you are home educating and why you are passionate about it and what is so great about home education. Somebody laughing at me.
Yeah, And I would also say that if you contacted a counsellor, your own counsellor, about something which has nothing to do with home education, and you've already got a relationship, then you can leverage that. And the other thing is that if you have got anywhere in your local council a green counsellor, contact them. Even if they're not your counsellor, contact them, because green counsellors are likely to be the most open. But again, remember, they know nothing about home education.
Okay, Julie, I'm just going to stop you there. There was a question about local authorities. Has it been raised that they could have better training, or they could be ex-home educators and that kind of thing? Yes, that has. That is something we are trying to like any conversations that any of us have with anyone who's got any influence in this position, that is something we're doing. Randall, I actually have Ian who's had his hand up.
Yeah, can I just jump in on the councillors and then let Ian come in, Juliet?
2 seconds.
Less than that.
Go for it, Randall, quickly.
Very quickly, Julie said it, you can get it works one way. Our experience in Shropshire was it also worked the other way. We had a rogue officer, and the councillors knew nothing about home education. We educated them about home education, and the policy got changed.
Well done, yeah. Good job. Ian, what would you like to add in?
Quick one to support Julie. Talking to senior people in local authority, they're shocked that parents don't use their counsellors more, because they can put the wind up officers, and it's just daft that you don't use the counsellors. Just thought, I'm sorry I've been late in because I didn't get the link for
Sorry, Ian.
But just raising the wider issues of the bill, because clearly from my point of view, because we run a learning community that supports home educated 63 children, what the bill is trying to do is to close down any support for home education. And anybody reading the bill should go right through to the bit on Ofsted, because Ofsted is now asking for permission to enter people's homes. And that would be quite a new and pretty horrendous possibility, that Ofsted officials can actually enter the family home if they wish.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Ian.
Putting that into context, the only other people that currently have a right to entry to your home would be the police and social services.
Yeah.
So to put us into that category, I think it is really, really dangerous ground about shifting this perspective and the conflation between home education.
And social services can't enter your home without an order, and the police can't enter your home without a warrant or very, very good cause to believe that somebody's about to come to some drastic harm. And
it's that assumption of harm, and it's really misplaced, and it's got no place in education.
Yeah, and we're on very dangerous ground here in terms of safeguarding gives them the right to ride all over people's rights, and we need to be very aware of that. So I'm going to suggest that we maybe try and run some workshops where people can come and we actually write our letters together and perhaps put up some suggestions. So maybe we sort out a few. So I will be talking to these guys here and maybe seeing if we can have a series of them for so you can just get into one of them, and we go through some points and you pick a few to write your letter, and you get your letter done right then and there and get it off. So I think we'll do something like that. So this is going to be available on the Action Group. This recording will stay on there, and so you can watch it back. But please just keep looking and thinking about creative ways of raising awareness, and just this is we're going to have to get quite creative, but we are going to have to get louder. And the thing is, we don't all have to be saying the same thing, but we should just all be doing it really loudly. Whatever we're saying, whatever we stand for, like our group can't represent you, every individual family, because every individual family is different. And the one thing we have in common is that we are passionate about home education and the right to educate our children as we believe they need. And whatever that looks like for you, you have every right. And so you do have to speak for yourself. It's not a time to wait for somebody else to speak for you. So thank you guys. I'm going to end that there. Thank you very much. Let me just